Um, it's July the 15th, it's about 4 o'clock, and I'm about to do a new video. It's the first one I've done for a month or so, I do apologise. What's happened today, apart from the continuing of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and the situation there with governments once again intervening in the marketplace, it's meant to be a free and fair marketplace with no manipulation. You can see that it's continually manipulated. It's just more obvious now than it's ever been in the past. What you have is that the markets are in another down day. As I say, Dow down almost 2%, the FTSE down 3%. And a continuing worry of the impact of the credit crisis. Now, we've all been aware, certainly for the last 2 years or so, that the market's been in dire trouble. The reality is if you take a look at the credit default swap market, which is something I want to look at a little bit later on, there is a lot of pain still to be had. Now, change is afoot. It always has been. Historically, financial crises have brought around significant crises elsewhere. War has often followed financial crisis, unfortunately. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I do look at coincidences, and I'm certainly not a coincidence theorist, which is somebody who just believes in coincidences. Who and how things are controlled, that's obviously difficult to ascertain, but it's clear that they are controlled. Whether that's because of a cosmological thing, like good versus evil, whether that's an historic thing because of cyclicality, whether that's an astrological thing due to movements of planets, everybody has their own opinions and so forth. For me, at this moment in time, what I want to look at is how we can best prepare for the future. We can look back and see that in history, 1907 led to the formation of the Fed in 1913 following that banking crisis, and the argument was based that we can't have banks continually going bust and stopping growth, so we need to have a central bank. Following that, there was World War I. That's 7 years after a banking crisis. We see in 1929 the Great Depression, and in 1938 Fannie Mae was set up to help boost the ability to get money into householders' hands so the American economy can move forward. And of course there was a war, 1939, the Second World War, 9 years after the banking crisis of the Great Depression, which ran for 15, 20 years in essence before things started to get back to normal after World War II, and quite some significant time after World War II, it should be added. You also can look at recent history where you see that the crash in the late 80s, and there was a war, the first Gulf War in 1990. So you can see historically finance can often lead into war. When there's a financial crisis, a war doesn't seem to be too far around the corner. I think the worry has to be, as this financial crisis continues, where does it lead to? Does it lead to further war? Does it lead to further problems? The possibilities are clear that the positioning with Iran currently, and certainly the division between religions at the present time, there are lots to worry about. Now, what can we do about it? Well, what we can do is we can kind of bring around I kind of put it in a spiritual term, and I'm sorry if I offend anyone out there, but you can bring around a consciousness, whether that's like a Buddhist consciousness, a Christ consciousness. You can just make people aware of the situation. Tell people that that these financial crises, when they say, well, are we at the end, and things look like they're getting better and you can trust us, governments will come up with solutions and financial institutions won't let you down. I think you have to just say, no, that's hogwash. In reality, our consciousness, our ability to connect with other human beings, and our ability to say to somebody who's lying to you, no, that's not true, is a good thing. And it's time for us to sort of have that kind of consciousness and sort of take back some essence of control. Barclays and the Royal Bank of Scotland, according to Newsnight, between them have about 5 trillion in credit derivatives. How many are default swaps wasn't clear. JP Morgan, according to Newsnight again, said that they had 8 trillion in potential derivatives out there. So you can see this aspect of why governments are manipulating the marketplace and stepping in and stopping the likes of IndyMac and Northern Rock and Bear Stearns and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac all from going bust, because who knows who owns the final debt? Somebody has to, and somebody has to obviously pay the piper, as they say. And it's criminal that in fact that these banks are being saved by taxpayer money, whether that's in the United States, in Europe, or elsewhere in the world. The reality is that in a free market, things are meant to fail. If they do fail, however, the whole thing collapses Either way, it's like a lose-lose situation. That's why it's important that you're prepared, and that's why it's important that you're prepared financially, emotionally, spiritually, in an educational background. You know, it's really important, because although the mainstream media are telling you things, they're not telling you everything. And I heard a journalist the other day say, where this all finishes, who knows? I'm just a journalist. Well, as a journalist, you know, he and she should be trying to find out where this all goes and who's to blame and so forth. So you can't depend on the mainstream media, as many of us know. But we also have to understand that we actually have to band together and help one another. And so over the course of the next 6 months or so, 29 weeks, myself and a good friend, Korean journalist, have put together a number of short videos which will explain how we've got to this situation. And we're going to stream it here on YouTube from 1907 right through to present day, and also how we can move forward. And I think that's the key aspect. How do we move forward? And that's really what I'll show you as well, some ideas with regards to the consciousness that's sort of out there. And I was interested by what Man of Truth said, Brent, the other day on a YouTube video. He talked about the aspect of sort of coming together and sustaining one another. And now, I don't necessarily think we should think about sustaining, because I think sustaining is holding on to the old. I think we should be looking at how do we move from current consciousness to new consciousness. And I'm sure Brett had a similar idea, so I'll be fascinated to see where that goes, and I'll be putting forward some of my own ideas as well. But for me, my message has always been about market manipulation, not depending on governments to protect you and look after you, but depending on yourself and depending on your family, and grouping together in communities and trying to make things right. Whether you're gaining new skills through gardening, survival, understanding local horticultural, educating yourself with regards to keeping mechanics running, alternative energies, whatever it might be, you know, to keep yourself sustainable. After all, as I've said many times before, you're responsible for you and your family and for your community, not the governments. Now, I wanted to end up on a few little quotes to make you understand why people don't necessarily listen to you, and they kind of think, oh, you know, these conspiracy theorists, this can't be correct. I think you've got to remember that public sentiment, according to Abraham Lincoln, public sentiment is everything. Without public sentiment, nothing can fail. With public sentiment, sorry, nothing can fail. Without it, nothing can succeed. He who molds opinion is greater than he who enacts law. So it's down to us, through whatever channels that we can use, to basically mold opinion. The famous writer H.L. Mencken said, "People admire most extravagantly the greatest liars. The men that they detest most violently are those who try to tell them the truth." When you're telling the truth, you're not going to be popular, but it's important that it is shared out there. And he also went on to say the most dangerous man to any government is the man who is able to think for himself. Almost inevitably, that man comes to the conclusion that the government he lives under is dishonest, insane, or intolerable. Now, I'm not saying our governments are necessarily all that way, or that the MPs are that way, but the reality is they're not out there to look after you. You are meant to look after yourself. And I wanted to end with the quote, well, two quotes. One from Albert Einstein: "You cannot solve the problems with the same level of consciousness that created them." So this financial market has taken us into an area, and we need a new system that's going to work better, one that is enlightened. Now, whether you see that as God's plan, or whether you see that as truth, or whether you see that as historical, astronomical, I'll leave that in your hands to decide. But we need a new level of consciousness to come up with a system which is better. This old system has to fall. Empires always fall. They always fall under the weight of themselves. And we can see it coming about currently, and we need to be prepared. And remember what Mahatma Gandhi said: you must be the change that you want to see in the world. So my challenge for you and for me and for all of us is, how do we come together as a community, not just online but offline as well, and sustain this change that clearly needs to take place? Because the old, no matter what they say to you, is dying, and we need to put a new in place, and that needs to be built on respect, truth, love, decency. And we need to make sure that we get back to some standards that were enacted not so long back in the original founding fathers of the Constitution, where things were in the power was in the hands of the people, and the majority could never prescribe to the minority what they should do.